Adrian Ramsay, this is looking like a change election. Most people have decided that if they want to be part of the change, they should vote Labour. Why are they wrong?
Well, people do definitely want a change in this election. That comes up on the doorstep all the time. People feel desperately let down by this government, but they're not feeling inspired by Labour either. And yes, we're on track for there to be a Labour government, but rather than Keir Starmer having such a huge majority where he can continue to take U-turns all the time, as he's been doing on climate and on funding for public services, if we have more of a diversity of voices in Parliament, including a group of Green MPs, we can push the new government to be bolder on the big issues that matter.
So you want to be a left-wing pressure group in Parliament, basically, to the left of Labour?
Well, I'm talking about the polls showing that we're on track to have a Labour government, and we need to push that government out of its timid pledges that it's making at the moment for the real hope and real change that we actually need if we're going to restore our NHS, build more affordable housing, tackle the scandal of sewage in our rivers. We need bold action on these issues, and by having a group of Green MPs in Parliament, we'll really change the political debate and push the new government to take the changes that our country so desperately needs.
I mean, Peter Mandelson has said that you've become the dustbin for disgruntled leftists. That's true, isn't it?
Well, if you look at where the Green Party support is right around the country, we've just come out of a set of elections where over the last 5 years in a row, Greens have gained a record number of seats. We've increased our number of elected Greens right across the country fivefold, and the seats that we're winning are from Labour and from the Conservatives in roughly equal numbers in urban areas and rural areas.
But your positions on most things are to the left, aren't you? You're a high tax, high spend, you want radical action on the environment. You've got all sorts of, weird and wonderful policies about how you're going to nationalise public transport and have £1 bus fares and all sorts of things that will never happen and cost a fortune. And they're all to the left of Labour. And they attract the left, don't they?
They attract people from a wide range of areas, and if you look at the places where we've got a strong chance of winning seats at this election, places like Bristol Central and Brighton Pavilion in cities, places like North Herefordshire and Waveney Valley in rural areas, those policies appeal to people across the spectrum. You don't have to be on the left to care about the environment. I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday in Halesworth, in the constituency where I'm standing. He's a grandfather, and he said to me that he usually votes Conservative, but that he's thinking about what the future's going to be like for his children and grandchildren.
But haven't you fundamentally failed on the green agenda in that net zero has kind of fallen off? The Conservatives have gone back. Labour is talking about clean energy rather than net zero. I mean, the central aim of the Green Party has been set back in the last 2 years, not forward.
Well, what you've set out there, Krishnan, is how both the main parties have let people down on the action that's needed on the environment. And yes, this is about tackling the climate crisis, and it's about creating a better society, because if we invest in the better public transport that we need, if we support our farmers to produce more food locally, if we insulate our homes so we bring bills down and keep homes warm, if we invest in renewable energy to tackle the energy crisis, all these things will create a better society for people. And people right across the country are desperate for that sort of change. They're fed up with the scandal of sewage in our rivers, with the lack of affordable housing, with our NHS at breaking point. And the Green Party is the only party going into this election being honest with people that if we're going to make the changes that are needed, we are going to have to ask the very richest in society, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, to pay just modestly more in tax. I'm talking about...
It's not just the very rich, is it? Because you want to remove the cap on national insurance, for example. That affects anybody earning more than £45,000.
That's true. We do think that we think the percentage that people pay on national insurance should be the same regardless of their earnings.
So you want taxes to go up on everyone from £45,000?
At the moment, the people who are on the lower to middle incomes are actually paying a higher percentage of their income on national insurance. That doesn't seem right.
But you also want to equalise capital gains tax with income tax, don't you?
Let me be clear, Krishnan, that the place where we are looking for the vast bulk of funding that we are seeking to raise so that we can restore our NHS, we can tackle the dental desert, we can tackle the patients in corridors in our hospitals, the vast majority of that funding is going to come from asking the multimillionaires, the billionaires, people with over 10 million in assets, to pay 1% on any wealth over 10 million. So quite a modest percentage.
You also want to raise capital gains tax to the same rate as income tax. that will hit every small business in the country. Everyone who builds a business and dreams of selling it one day to create their nest egg will be hit massively by that as an idea. That's not multimillionaires, that's ordinary, hard-working small business owners.
Well, actually, the Green Party has a lot of policies in our manifesto for how we would support small businesses, because small businesses are the bedrock of our economy.
I mean, you know,
what we're talking about is that there's a lot of people in society who earn income from assets, and the percentage of that income is taxed at is significantly lower than people who earn their income from being employed. And yes, we would like to equalise that as part of a range of measures that will raise the money that's needed to restore our NHS, to bring about a transition to a green future. But we also have a whole suite of policies which will be reflected in our manifesto coming out about how we can support and safeguard particularly small and independent businesses, which are the bedrock of so many of our communities, and particularly in the market towns in Norfolk and Suffolk that I'm out in every day. Those small businesses are a crucial part of those local towns, and the Green Party, more than any party, wants to really support and see how we can really help small businesses to play a huge role in those areas.
I mean, isn't the truth that you've been caught on the hop, like many people, by this early election in terms of both policy and candidates? I mean, you've had to take down a load of pages from your website of sort of some of the more eccentric policies that you had in the past, and you haven't got the new ones up yet, and you haven't sorted out all your candidates. I mean, you know, you're still facing that sort of problem of being a bit crazy in places.
Christian, we are better prepared going into this election than we have ever been before. Last time I checked, we had far more candidates selected than the Conservative Party did. We've got a clear strategy going into this election. But you've ditched meat rationing,
which haven't you? Well, what else have you ditched?
The distinction you're making there, Christian, is around policies that we had in place for a long-term vision for society, compared to, as all parties do, we'll be producing our manifesto for what we were putting forward for this next 5 years of this next Parliament. That manifesto is coming out on the 12th of June. It's been in preparation for a long time, so the fully costed elements of it that you were starting to refer to, we've been planning for some time, so we can show how we would get the funding that's needed to restore our NHS, to transition to a green economy, to make sure we have affordable housing, to tackle the crisis of affordable housing in this country. So we've got clear costed policies that we'll show in our manifesto. We've got candidates selected for all corners of the country more than ever before.
You've had to withdraw something,
and if I could add to that, Christian, we've got a clear strategy for this election, because we know that under the voting system we've got, Greens need to finish first in certain constituencies to win seats. And we've got big concentrations of support in places like Waveney Valley, Bristol Central, North Herefordshire, Brighton Pavilion, where people in those areas know that Greens are the main challenger, and our activists are actively supporting our laser-focused campaign in those areas to get Greens elected. Because we're not about shaving a few votes off another party. We're about having elected Greens representing their communities and pushing this government, the new government we're expecting, to be bold for the real hope and real change that our country needs.
But isn't this the real problem that you have, that you've still got crackpots standing for you and people who just say things that are unacceptable? You've had people had to withdraw because of alleged anti-Semitism within the party over the Israel-Gaza war. And, you know, the Green Party suffers massively from our current electoral system. But what that means is, you know, you just don't work in a British political context, do you? In the way that European Green Parties do.
Well, the Green Party's really come of age in recent years. We have increased our number of councillors right across England and Wales fivefold in the last 5 years. The number of councils where Greens are part of the administration is 40. We have 10 councils where Greens are the largest party. So we are playing a huge role in democracy in this country already. And in terms of our candidates, we are planning to stand candidates right across England and Wales.
Are you reviewing them all
there
now in the light of...
There are 570 seats. Wherever any questions have been raised about things candidates have said in the past, those are being investigated through the right channels internally. There have been 3 candidates out of the 570 seats where the person who was selected is no longer in place. There's a small number more still being looked at. And you could look at any political party, and there are examples that you'll know of and you'll have covered, where people have been selected and later resigned or withdrawn. those numbers are not higher in the Green Party than they are anywhere else. And actually, the fact that you're looking at us with the same scrutiny as the other parties, the fact that you can look at local councils where Greens are having a real impact on people's everyday lives locally, the fact that we're talking about having a record number of Green MPs pushing this next government to be bold in an election that's turning out to be, frankly, quite boring, and where Greens are putting forward the policies that are really needed for real hope and real change for the future, that's what shows that the Green Party is running our most ambitious campaign ever, and that we've really come of age as a party.
Do you still want to rejoin the EU?
So our manifesto will set out our policy in relation to the European Union. What it will say is that we want to have much stronger working relationships with the European Union in a number of ways, and there were some short-term measures
it was to rejoin,
that
you're
can be
dropping
taken.
that.
No, it will say in there that our position over time is to rejoin the EU when the conditions are right, political and economic conditions. So we're not talking about doing that immediately, but what we do want to do is to be very clear as a party that we're an internationalist party, that the big issues of our time, whether that's climate, whether that's issues of digital technology, whether it's around global inequality, trade, skills shortages, all of these issues need to be tackled through global cooperation. And so Greens want to be close to our European partners, and there's a number of steps that could be taken, even while we're outside the EU, to improve those steps. And sadly, we've seen too many people looking for headlines and pushing our country in a more of an isolationist direction.
I mean, to have a future, you need to attract young voters, is the truth. But what's your offer to young people? I mean, you know, you're not really offering them much on housing. You know, why vote Green if you're 20 years old?
Well, I was 16 when I first joined the Green Party over 25 years ago, and I joined because I knew that the Green Party was the party that really understood that the climate crisis is the defining issue of our time, that global inequality is something that needs urgent action to be addressed, and that as one of the richest countries in the world, we can play a leading role in that. And those issues have only got greater in that time. And in terms of housing and the specific issues that affect people day to day, that we've made housing one of our central planks in this manifesto. We need far more affordable housing in this country. There's over 1 million people on the council house waiting list. So we're very clear we would be far tougher with developers to require that there's more affordable housing for people to buy in any new development.
Being tougher on developers means less homes get built.
Well, it's about the right homes being built, because
it's about more homes being built.
The people I speak to in East Anglia and around the country all the time are seeing homes being built that are out of the reach of local people. People being priced out of being able to live in their own local community. So, and that applies to people seeking to buy, it applies to people seeking to rent. We need more council homes. We would give councils the power to borrow more and give them more funding to build more council housing. 150,000 new council homes a year we've pledged, which could be a combination of new builds and refurbishing or bringing back into use empty homes or homes that are being sold by landlords exiting the market.
That's not enough either, is it?
But that will make a huge difference. But what we also need to do is give support to people who are renting in the private rented sector, where there are some examples of private landlords hiking up rents well above the rate of inflation, certainly well above the rates that people's wages are going up. And we would give local councils the power to introduce controls on rents based on the local circumstances and what's needed to keep rents affordable locally. And that's a very practical policy that will support particularly young people.
Keir Starmer says he's relaxed about people being rich and getting richer. Are you?
Well, Greens have a vision for a future where we are investing in the transition to an environmentally friendly way of living, renewable energy that can keep people's bills down, insulating people's homes in a way that means the homes are warmer, that their bills are not going up all the time, improve public transport, supporting our farmers to produce more of our food locally. And so the transition to a green economy will present huge job opportunities for people around the country, huge opportunities for business, including the small businesses that we were talking about. So Greens want an economy that's really thriving.
But do you want people to aspire to be rich, as Labour does now?
What I want is a society where everybody's basic needs are met, so that people are not having to choose between heating and eating. People can pay their bills. People have got good quality air to breathe. People can access an NHS dentist and doctor when they need to. And if you just approach economic policy in a way where you're simply measuring the amount of activity in the economy without looking at, do we have a healthy environment? Are our rivers full of sewage? Are people able to access the NHS dentist and doctor when they need one? Are people able to feed their children? Child poverty has increased enormously around this country. If you just take a blunt approach to economics of just looking at growth for growth's sake, you fail to recognise that we have a hugely unequal country and that we only have one planet. And what people say to me all the time is that they want to see parties taking the urgent action on the environment. They know that Labour and the Conservatives have let them down. And that's why we need Greens as part of the political debate in this election, but in Parliament after the election as well, to push the new government to be bolder on these crucial issues of our time.
I mean, isn't the truth that since 2010, you've had one MP, you've been constantly talking about breakthrough, and the truth is this election could be the one where the Greens go from one MP to none?
What's happened since 2010, and particularly in the last 5 years, is that the strength of the Green Party across the country has grown enormously. We've increased our number of elected Greens
in councils,
fivefold.
yes, but when it comes to Westminster, Caroline Lucas is stepping down, and that kind of tells you everything. She's had enough.
Caroline Lucas is very clear that she wants to see a group of Green MPs in this next Parliament. She's out on the campaign trail supporting our campaign in places like Bristol Central, Waveney Valley, North Herefordshire and Brighton Pavilion, places where we've got a big concentration of Green support, where Greens are the main challenger and where it's very clear that if people want there to be a Green voice in Parliament, we can achieve that and we can push the new government to be bolder. Because whilst people desperately want to change at this election, they see that Labour's pledges are timid and that we need real hope and real change to tackle the challenges this country faces, and that having Greens as part of that political debate will push the new Parliament, the new government, in the right direction.
Give me one example where you would push Labour to be more hopeful, to offer more.
We need to put the investment that's needed into the NHS. So we are arguing that we should ask the very richest in society to pay modestly more in tax so that we can afford to invest in our NHS. We're the only party being honest in this election that we need to do that. Our tax proposals are modest by European standards, asking people with 10 million of wealth to pay 1% over that 10 million. But if we put in place measures like that, we will raise the funds that are needed, the tens of billions by the end of this next Parliament, that will enable us to restore our NHS, address the fact that we've got patients in corridors, that the staff are severely overstretched, that people can't get access to an NHS dentist when they need one, that our social care system is at breaking point. These are the changes that we need. So whether it's on public services, whether it's on affordable housing, whether it's on the climate emergency as the defining issue of our time, having Greens elected in the next Parliament, a group of Green MPs to push the new government to be bolder, it couldn't be more urgent that we press the government to take the action that's needed.
Just finally, I mean, is it a luxury that you enjoy that you're not going to be the government, so you don't actually have to make your sums add up? You can throw ideas out there that might well cost a fortune, and you don't really need to worry about it because you can throw them out there as nice ideas, things that would be nice to have. You don't have to be responsible, do you? That's the truth.
Look, Christian, my background is as a charity chief executive of national environmental charities. I'm used to running organisations where, of course, you have to make the budgets work. You have to run the organisation effectively to have an impact. And we are producing a fully costed manifesto which will show exactly how we would fund the proposals that we're putting forward. And we are doing that just as rigorously as any other party because we need to show the vision for what this next Parliament could do if we're going to tackle the defining issues of our time: growing inequality, far too many children in poverty. It's a scandal that that's the case. People not being able to access an NHS dentist, patients in corridors in our hospitals, our rivers full of sewage, the climate emergency being, rather than taken as an opportunity to create a fairer future, Labour quick to overturn its promises of the money it was going to put in. On all these issues, we desperately need more Greens as part of that political debate in Parliament, and we can get that at this election by people voting with their heart and voting for the real hope and real change that this country needs.
Adrian Ramsay, thank you very much.